Hi, I'm Steve from Nearly Wild, and I'm here today with...
I'm Mick Green.
Mick Green. Mick, you're an ecologist by background, really, aren't you? Been involved in many things along the way.
Yeah, that's probably overall. I've been described many things in my life, but probably ecologist is the politest. So,
okay, well, we'll work with that one.
We'll go with that one.
Yep,
we'll go with that one. Yep.
Okay. Well, we're sitting up on the top of Penllyn Vawr, and I know that you've got a lot of knowledge of this area, and you've spent many years on and off surveying bits around here. I was just interested to get a few insights from you as to how things have changed in from what you actually see in real terms, rather than the kind of spin that's put on things.
It's certainly changed quite a lot. We can look out and see forestry, which a lot now is being cleared, and management to forestry is changing over the years. I first surveyed this way back in 1984 for what was the Nature Conservancy Council then, what is now Natural Resources Wales. Since then we saw sheep numbers rise incredibly during the 1990s due to the way the payments were given to farmers. Since then we've seen sheep numbers fall off a lot, and in fact this particular area hasn't been grazed at all for 12 years. Right. So we're seeing a lot of recovery of the vegetation up here, and some recovery of the birds. We now get grouse up here, which we didn't do 20 years ago. Merlins have bred recently.
I saw a merlin on the way here.
Oh, there you go. Yep. So it's definitely improving, and that's with the help of agri-environment payments and the cooperation of the tenant farmers and things like that. So it shows what can be done, and I think we can see recovery. We've still got an awful lot. Most of what we look out here isn't the most exciting landscape as an ecologist, compared with rainforests or the parts of northern Scotland or something. But it's definitely got its own ecology, and it's definitely is on the improvement in many areas, and I think it shows what can be done. And
we were just looking at dwarf willow, which is, for those of you who don't know, is really tiny. I mean, it doesn't look amazing, but I'll maybe drop a link to a photo in at the bottom of the video so you can have a look. But yeah, I mean, we just found some of that, and we think that's what, the southernmost location in the UK?
It's, as far as we know, it's the southernmost location, because it's basically an Arctic alpine. Yes. You get it in North Wales, and certainly places like the Cairngorms, it's quite common, and it grows very low with a moss with the unpronounceable name of Racometrium, which is again an Arctic alpine. So although this is mid Wales, because it's so exposed and we've got very thin soils, we're seeing the remnants of an Arctic alpine vegetation on the tops here. Yeah. And then of course when we get further down the hill, we're into heathermoor and bogs, and we start to get a few trees coming in further down. So we've got, and then we're not far down to Cardigan Bay and the marine habitat. So we've got a bit of everything here, really.
So there's something I just wanted to, we were talking a little bit about this before, and that's this whole issue of sort of levels of grazing, and there's a kind of perception, I think, that if you see grassy hills that it's overgrazed, or particularly if it's got what appears to be very short grass on it, or in areas of it, and that it really would have all been wooded. And we've kind of got a set of expectations of what these places are. And you've just said, I mean, this is acidic soils, very, very thin and in very exposed conditions. So that already limits what grows here. I mean, would it be likely, do you think, that there'd be trees all over these sorts of places? Or when would that have happened?
I think it's very unlikely that this would ever have been forest, where they have done peat cores for the south of here in the Elan Hills. That's back to Bronze Age. And there's still no significant tree pollen.
But in Bronze Age, it would have been a Mediterranean climate.
It would have been a different climate and much drier. And obviously, it's now much wetter, and we've got the peat bogs. And where we've had no grazing, there's a place just the south of here on the main road where there's been no grazing for a number of years, and it's scattered willow and a few other trees, but it's scattered because most of the area is too wet for the trees to come in. So yes, I think we look too much at it has to be woodland or grassland, or we can never be something in between. It's quite likely in the long term, certainly with climate change, that we'll get a few scattered trees coming in. There's the odd non-native tree coming from the forestry plantations here. There's the odd little Sitka spruce coming in. And if they can come in, and if you go into the next valley, there's the odd rowan tree coming in. Because they tend to get spread by the birds carrying the berries. So you'll get scattered trees, but I can't see it ever being forest, and that's not necessarily what we want. And I think we need to look at variety. Again, we look at heather, and if we look down below us, we've got scattered heather.
Yeah.
From a nature conservation point of view, people would say, oh no, we need a solid heather moor, which was basically a Victorian invention for grouse moors, of burning the heather and managing it as monoculture heather. Monocultures are not natural.
Yeah. And certainly if you go to other countries, I mean, you go up into where there's heather, there's also bilberry, crowberry and all sorts of other plants, and much more of a mosaic of plant than rather just...
It depends on the topography, on the wetness.
Yeah.
You get trees on the drier slopes and obviously saggon and bogs on the wetter slopes, and we can see some pools down below us which are never going to have trees on because that's a very wet area. But we get teal breeding down there, which is really nice.
Interesting.
And they like open, obviously more open areas of water to keep so they can see predators coming. So
yeah.
So we need a variety. I mean, I can hear a sheep somewhere over there, which shouldn't be here, but the odd one here and there doesn't really make a difference. So,
but it sounds, I mean, it's obviously quite a complicated topic, and also obviously sheep are also serving us another purpose, which is providing meat, they're providing wool, and if we're going to move away from petrochemical based clothing, then you know, back to wools and cottons could be really important. So there may be a new need for those sorts of animals, and it seems to be more about managing for the kind of diversity but also a complexity, and not making assumptions on what's happening elsewhere. So you can't really just look at somewhere and go it's overgrazed or undergrazed, because you need to have a much better understanding of all of the ecological system. And I was just reflecting this with farmer and how that might work.
As an ecologist, my main interest is birds.
Yeah.
But if I was a butterfly specialist, I'd want a completely different type of grazing. And then if you were a botanist or lichenologist or specialist botanist, you'd want a completely different type of grazing again. So there's no one size fits all. So again, as you say, the variety is what we need.
And then looking at...
It's golden plover going now.
I was just saying, we've just got a golden plover going over, which is why we're looking round.
3 golden plovers just flew over.
That's nice. So we've done quite well for birds, considering it's not supposed to be so brilliant. We've not done bad, have we?
And again, in 1984, we had about a dozen pairs of golden plover breeding up here.
Right.
We resurveyed in 2011, had 3 pairs, and I now think it's back up to 6 or 7 pairs last time I looked. So again, it's coming back.
Yeah.
We can get nature back.
Yeah, yeah.
With, as you said, a mixture of grazing. Golden plover like it quite short, but not too short. And some other birds, if you want hen harriers, you want deeper heather. So we want a bit of everything, really.
So we're balancing, trying to create these mosaics, managing for what nature may not be, as you say, one size fits all. There's more about this complexity, and actually farming allows us to do that and derive some productivity from some of the areas at the same time. So, and there's obviously that historic link to the land and the culture and everything else that goes with that. So it sounds like a really complicated topic, but it's interesting talking to you, Mick, that there have been some really positive changes and that we're starting to see some good things happening up here.
Yes, and I think, I mean, the other big change I've seen over the years is the loss of cattle in the hills, because they're not economic anymore. I know some of my neighbours who are farmers would really like to have their Welsh blacks back, local native breed.
Yes.
And because cattle graze at a completely different way to sheep, they produce a completely different form of landscape and swards. So I'd like to see more cattle back, so we have a variety of grazers. And because obviously in a natural system, which we're never going to have here, we've mucked around with it for too long, but natural system, herbivores are part of the system.
Absolutely, and a variety of herbivores.
Variety of herbivores, because even different varieties of cattle and different varieties of sheep graze in different ways and produce different types of sward, and good for some species, not so good for others. So yeah, variety is the spice of life.
Excellent.
And I think, I mean, obviously at the moment the farmers having a really bad time. Their wool clip this year wasn't worth anything. Yeah. They were giving it away, throwing it away, which seems such a waste for such a really good natural insulating product.
Absolutely.
You know, if we're serious about sustainability, we should be utilising you know, what is the point in having sheep where the meat is too expensive to buy locally and the wool isn't worth anything?
Yeah.
It's just the economics has gone bonkers.
Well, that's a really useful insight, Mick. Thanks very much for that. And for those of you who haven't been up here, I highly recommend it, especially if you're lucky enough to get a weather like we've had today. But I've so far seen buzzard, merlin, red kite, kestrel, heard the plover. So I don't think we've done bad for birds amongst some of the other smaller species and so on.
Not bad for this time of year, because we're sort of the tail end of the, most birds are starting to leave the mountains now, because it gets cold and bleak. So spring's the time to be here. We get dotterel on passage here.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's say golden plover breeding. Ring ouzels used to breed, and hopefully will come back soon. And so yeah, it's quite diverse. But you have to look. They're not as common as they should be.
But hopefully it's starting to come back, and hopefully what you've gained from this is understanding that, you know, somebody with years of experience up here, seeing these changes, and this understanding that actually there aren't simple answers to these questions. It's not easy. You can't just come out with these statements like it's overgrazed. It actually is extremely complex, and you have to know the habitat. And some of the people that know it the best are the people who've worked here, either as an ecologist or farmed it, or been coming up here all their lives, walking or on mountain bikes or whatever it might be. So I think it's about reaching out and trying to understand what's going on from the people who spend a lot of time up here, many of them running nature-based businesses, many of them in other forms.
Yeah. And not get too fixated on habitats. Look a variety. If you get a couple of trees growing in the middle of your bog, great. Whereas the government conservation bodies will say, oh, that's in unfavourable condition, we need to get rid of the trees. Well, why? You know, we can have a couple of trees here, we can have a bit of heavily grazed pasture there, we can, you know, if you get the mix, you'll get the mix of species with it as well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Mick.
Okay, good to see you. Good to be up here on such a day.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. More information at the end of the video. See you again soon.